Should we kick off? Well, thank you so much for everyone for giving up their time, and thank you so much for the panel for giving up their time and their expertise. I think I know a few of you here, but for those who don't, my name is Joseph. I'm the founder of Growth & Company. I've worked in growth for 17 years, and I've gone to the dark side of recruitment. I was the head of growth or a VP of growth, and basically I had pretty awful advice, and I was getting recruiters pushing me into roles I didn't know and the company didn't understand, and I couldn't talk to my boss. I didn't have a great network. So it's great that we can put on events like this to give people a bit of advice. The growth role is changing, it's evolving fast, so we've got 4 veterans here to give us their deep expertise and their journey and their kind of hints. So yeah, thanks so much for joining, and thanks so much for them coming, and I'll pass over to my lovely friend.
Thank you very much, Joseph, and welcome to our panel discussion on the path to head of growth. My name is Meagan, and my own path to head of growth has been nothing really but linear. So I'm always very curious to hear how the head of growth journeys, how they got where they are now. Today, I'm joined by 3 incredible growth leaders with who they have completely different background, and they'll be sharing their own experience and learnings as well from their careers so far. We'll be discussing the topic for about 40 to 45 minutes, so that we have some Q&A at the end. If you have any questions during the panel discussion, please pop your questions in the chat that you can see at your bottom right. Joseph will be correcting those, and we will answer to them. We will answer to as many as possible at the end of the panel discussion. Now over to our panelists. If you could do a quick intro before we get started, that'd be great. I'm going to start with alphabetical order to make it easy. So Emily, up to you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Emily, and I look after growth at Dojo.
Thank you, Emily. Now, I think if I know the alphabetical order well, I think next is Meg.
I'm like, which one is it? I'm Meagan, and I'm the head of growth at Days Brewing, the non-alcoholic beer.
Please, Nick.
And I'm Nick, and I've recently started as marketing director at Heights. We're a D2C subscription service for science-backed supplements for gut and brain health.
Thank you, guys, and congratulations, Nick, for your new role. I'm going to start actually from you, Nick. I'd like to, just to tell us your journey to head of growth from where you started and where you are now. What's your story, Nick?
Yeah, I actually completely fell into the head of growth position. I was originally working at Amazon for 5 years on various internal startups. Then my last couple of years there was in the Amazon Prime team, which is where I started to get into the subscription space. I left to start my own business. I made a lot of mistakes and realized I wanted to be in a team and being around other people and learning from them again. And as I said, fell into it. The right position came up at the right time to join a high growth company, Mindful Chef, as head of growth. To be honest, if I was hiring for that position at that point in time, I probably wouldn't have hired me. But it was an incredible opportunity and came with lots of challenges in terms of growing the business. And then I think that's where I built my kind of foundational knowledge of growth, which I'd then be able to take forward into future roles.
That's awesome. So working with different marketing roles at Amazon, starting your own business, and essentially turning all the mistakes into learnings and then apply them to your career as you were going along. Meg, over to you. What was your journey so far?
I would also say it was very squiggly, but always working within digital marketing. So I started in a global media agency called OMD in San Francisco, and then transferred to the London office, and then worked in a lot of more traditional digital marketing roles, kind of like on big brands. So like Marc Jacobs, Calvin Klein, Rimmel, and then like work client side at Sky. I kind of hated working in corporate brands because I got really stuck. Like I wanted to do new things and kind of like drive transformation. And it's really hard in those bigger companies. And then on the side, started my own blog and then created this community of parents, which became relatively popular. And then realized, actually, I'm just going to start my own influencer marketing platform and agency. So started that and absolutely loved like the whole process of building something from scratch, like figuring out things on my own. And landed MasterCard as a client within the first 3 months, which was amazing. We worked with like scale-ups in the US and UK. Unfortunately, when the pandemic happened, I had to like shut down the business because MasterCard stopped doing all of their events. And it was kind of like making this big decision. But what I learned is like, I love growth and I love like making an impact. And the first role, head of growth role, was with Taster. And I think the CMO like took a chance on me, even though I didn't really have like the necessarily like growth skills. I did have a lot of experience in digital marketing and strategy and like building things and just figuring things out. So I think he did kind of take a chance. And that's when I then, got into head of growth role at Taster. And then since then have moved to History Hit, which is subscription based, and then now I'm at Days.
Thank you, Meg. So again, another very squiggly career, I would say, so far. So working it from the largest media agencies, moving into client side, moving from a continent to another continent, funding your business, and essentially making a lot of connection as well, and constantly learning as well from all the mistakes and all things that we're throwing at you from a macroeconomic perspective to also from your connections. Emily, did you also fund your own business before heading up growth?
I feel like there's a trend here. Kind of, sort of. I guess like my career similarly is very squiggly, and I feel it's really easy to connect the dots looking backwards. You can be like, oh, that helped me do this, which helped me do this. But at the time, I don't think I had any idea what was happening. So I guess I started kind of in the early days of mobile is where I'd start connecting my dots. There was a founder of a mobile app startup who left Apple, decided to start his own thing, had this crazy idea that apps were going to be this new ecosystem. And I met him and I thought he was amazing. And he took a chance on me, and I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes. I also learned a lot, similarly, I think, to Megan. I just started getting hands-on, tried to do stuff myself, tried to break things, which was really useful. And I think because there was no guidebook at the time for how to do mobile growth or like what sort of users of digital products were in this ecosystem, there was a lot of opportunity to play and explore. I also got to spend a lot of time sort of thinking about different types of brands that probably I would have had no business working for at the time. I also would not have hired me. But the startup sold, it was great. I was able to say, I don't want to work in a giant agency, which is the group that acquired us, and say, I want to start my own consultancy. So that's what I did. I had a lot of really amazing support through that process, got exposed to a lot of wider marketing channels, sort of expanded my knowledge of growth to sort of other product ecosystems, not just mobile product, but also sort of web products as well. And then I went in-house. So I, similar to Nick, was craving a team dynamic again. I was feeling, I guess, sad about sort of swooping in to an organization, working with the team, and then kind of at some point maybe swooping out. And I wanted to have sort of my long-term family. And I put out some vibes in my network that I was looking to relocate, and also I was looking for a new role. And thankfully, Skyscanner was looking for somebody to help grow their mobile program. And they reached out to me. We had a nice interview process, and I took the role and I relocated to London at that time. And I guess from there, I sort of bridged my consulting career. I was sort of hired in almost like an internal consulting capacity, but also then was able to lead some teams and transform my role a bit. I ended up leading some product teams and some marketing teams. And I think that was a really sort of pivotal moment in my career to move from being more of a growth consultant to being more of a head of growth. And that's when I moved to Depop. Someone I worked with at Skyscanner had moved to Depop, and they had a role for me as a head of growth. And that was, I guess, my move there. Since then, Depop had some wonderful success story, got acquired by Etsy, which was fabulous. And after that, I thought I wanted to expand my, I guess, growth tool belt. I'll probably talk about this a bit more, but like I often think of kind of the things that you have in your growth toolkit as like your marketing levers, your product levers. And I was missing sales levers or commercial levers. And so I really wanted to try out a bit more sort of heavy B2B. And I was speaking to the folks at Dojo at the time, and they were looking for someone to kind of build out some more of the marketing engine here while also being able to work closely with the sales team. So that's where I'm at now.
Thank you, Emily. So definitely another, how we call these days, squiggly career, startup experience in moving into consulting, working for huge scale-ups, moving from B2C to B2B. I think there is like a really clear pattern among you all, really, which is essentially there's a craving for making an impact. So kind of like being, tired of working for a big corporation and not really seeing like a direct impact, but also the constant wanting to learn and apply those mistakes and those failures and making into learning is really really fascinating. Emily, I'm going to stick with you if that's okay. How do you define the role of head of growth at the companies you have worked before and where you are now at Dojo? And how does it differ, if it differs, from traditional marketing, head of marketing, and or traditional head of performance marketing?
Great question. So I feel that the role is different at every company because growth is different at every company, and that's, I guess, par for the course. I'm kind of going back to what I was saying about sort of different levers within your tool belt. And there's also like different growth models. So companies will have different business models. Some are like subscription businesses. Some are built on sort of media. Some are built in sort of different ways. And kind of the different business models will usually work better or worse with different kinds of growth levers. So that's sort of one side of what could influence the scope of the role. I think the other side of the scope of the role is whether or not the business knows how it's going to grow yet or not, or it needs someone to come in and really help sort of build out that business model and help define that can also make a very big difference. My career, I guess, historically, I've focused a lot on kind of the product-led growth levers or the marketing growth levers. More recently, I would say that my career has gone deeper into some of the marketing levers, and also I'm trying to sort of pick up more of those sort of like sales and partnerships levers now. But I would say historically, I've had roles where there was no sales and partnerships model on at least the B2C side of the marketplace. And so our primary mechanisms for driving growth would have been through product and through marketing. My role today is probably the most similar to a head of performance marketing role of the ones that I've worked in historically, in that a large part of my remit is looking after how do we sort of build marketing-led growth capabilities in an organization that's been sort of historically not only sales-led, but sort of sales-only. And so looking at how we can build in marketing growth levers that both augment that sales channel, but also can stand independently is something that I've been doing recently. And that's probably the most similar to a head of performance marketing.
Thanks, Emily. Essentially, you had a different definition of growth department really throughout your experience, and essentially was all depending on the growth model, but also the growth stage of the company, where the company were when you joined. Meg, what's your experience?
Yeah, I would say similar. Like, it really depends on where the growth was coming from. So like, for example, at Taster, which if people don't know what Taster is, but they have dark kitchens on Deliveroo, Uber Eats, and Just Eat. So a lot of the growth came from those platforms, and it was like figuring out how can we grow on those platforms and working strategically with like the people at Deliveroo, but then also like the performance marketing side and email marketing was still really relevant, trying to gather first party data and like build that taster community and like build out this like owned ecosystem. But then History Hit was focused on like subscription growth, and a lot of the growth there came from performance marketing, specifically Meta. So got really into the detail of like creative optimization and like what we can do within Meta. And then Days feels a little bit similar, like performance marketing at the moment is kind of key, but then also there's a lot more opportunity because they are like a scale up, but I'd say like there's a lot more opportunity with like MPD, and which is literally what we're discussing now. So really excited to kind of work on that going forward.
Really interesting. So again, B2C, B2B doesn't really matter, but what really matters in between your two experiences probably exactly what the growth level is in the specific company where you are. Nick, how was growth defined in your role so far?
I think like Emily and Meg, like joining at an early stage, you have the opportunity to define that within a company often. I think in my broad experience at startups, Microsoft, KatKin, and now Heights, I've joined relatively early, but post finding product market fit. So there's often a bit of a playbook to build on already and adapt to be your own and add on to that and find out what works, and ultimately, work out where are the rate limiting steps or the points for maximum leverage to grow the business. For me, I define head of growth role and growth as a function really broadly. In terms of the D2C space, it's like leading a high performance team to drive as many quality new customers as possible, as cheaply as possible, by any means possible. And I think where that differs to like a traditional marketing or performance marketing role is it cuts across multiple areas. So cutting across product and marketing and growth, having a really rigorous growth process, which I think is definitely something I missed earlier in my career, but focus on a lot now. And then also embracing uncertainty. I think in some other areas, particularly like brand marketing, there's a belief that, and you kind of have to have a conviction because you can't test and learn easily that what you're doing is the right thing. Whereas I think the growth process inherently comes with a high degree of uncertainty. We think this is the right thing, but we're going to test it and measure it and learn from it to see, and then build on what we learn. And then, yeah, I think in terms of cutting across areas, for me personally in my career, a huge like focus for me has been the intersection of paid and creative and conversion rate testing, with those things working like synergistically to improve performance.
Thank you, Nick. Again, like a very broad definition. But it sounds that it's always about essentially leading a high performance team that help you acquire, retain, and monetize customers in a sustainable way, as well as in a scalable way, with process, which I would absolutely love to know more about. Processes, we all know how our key is in for any growth practitioner, really. I'm going to start with you, Meg, for the next question. So in your experience, what are the most critical skills and competencies that you need to have when you become a head of growth?
Yeah, I think it's really about the ability to change and be open-minded to change. Because I think it's always evolving, like new technology, new platforms, like different business models. It's just constantly changing. So being okay with that is, like, I would say, the number one thing. And like really believing in yourself as well, because of the fact that things are changing all the time. Having the kind of inner this is like so not about skills at all, but being like, I'm confident with, and I'm okay with like the unknown, and I'm gonna just go for it anyways, I think is also really important.
Really love that, Mike. So yeah, so you the ability to essentially constantly learn quickly and be okay with the fact that everything will change constantly, and again, believe in yourself. It's important to also understand where to be okay with the fact that you said it, we might not know the answer, but you'll try and figure it out, right? Nick, what would you add to that?
I think for me, firstly, completely agree on having a high level of adaptability and being able to kind of roll with the punches, test and learn and build on that. I think for me, when I think of career growth and skills to get to head of growth, I think of like there's table stakes skills in terms of grit, hard work, curiosity, focus, the ability to lead a high performance team, and then there's almost personal positioning, which is like what's your edge, and how do you position yourself as a category of one to solve a problem for the companies you want to work for, and then how I think about that is really like, how do I layer complementary skills upon each other? So for example, there's like the understanding customers deeply side of things, so customer interviewing, job to be done interviewing, and then layer on the ability to bring transform that insight into creative, and then layering on a basic understanding of psychology and conversion rate optimization, and like technical platform knowledge to be able to kind of end to end take that insight and see it through the growth process to drive growth.
Awesome. So I like how you categorize them. So there's the table stakes skills. So basically your grit, your hard work, the what's going to make you different. So what's your edge, and then essentially the high value skills. So understanding what your actual practicality of your day-to-day will be. Really like that. Emily, what about yourself?
I guess I categorize this like in my own way. So I think one of the things I most often lean on in this role, and I think doesn't maybe get talked about enough, are the kind of core commercial acumen skills. There's a lot of like upfront work in this role that's sort of taking a look at the overall business metrics and sort of breaking those down and building a sort of model. And so I think that it's really, really useful for people who are going into this field to get a really deep sense of finance. How do businesses measure overall business performance? What does that look like? What are some of the sort of, I guess, like quick ratios or different types of sort of formulas that people use to kind of gauge things very quickly, but also how do those things really break down in the numbers, and where can you find those numbers, and how can you talk to a finance team about those numbers? And so I would say from like a hard technical skills perspective, I think commercial acumen and data modeling are really essential. And no matter how senior you get, being able to get hands-on and build a data model is really important. Sort of with that, or to complement that, analytical skills go a long way. And then I also often talk about sort of business sense. So people who go into product, they talk often about product sense, which is that kind of sixth sense that you develop when you kind of can start to really understand and pattern match around what makes a great product and how people use products, and sort of what's intuitive and not intuitive for different audience types. I also think there is a business sense, and being able to develop that business sense allows you to really quickly and easily sort of understand what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, and to kind of, I guess, work through complex problems in a straightforward, common sense style way. So I think exposing yourself to lots of different business problems can really help. Of course, everything I think that Nick mentioned in terms of, knowing your experimentation frameworks, et cetera, really important. Traits, I also think adaptability is the number one. I also think curiosity and humility are really important. The people who thrive in this role are the people who always say, oh, that's interesting, and then try and dive a little bit deeper into what does that mean, and are also humble enough to really listen to the insight when they're wrong and be like, I learned that I was wrong about that. That's fantastic. Let me pull on that thread as far as I possibly can until I learn as much as I can. And then I think because we're talking about a head of growth role here, and because I think Nick also talked about this idea of high performing teams, I think some of the really core leadership skills are really important. So being able to hire well, to be able to manage well, all of those classic things are, of course, really important. I think in this role, especially, also setting really clear direction, guardrails, and expectations for a team is essential, because you're basically able to point lots of different vectors into many different areas if you want to, which could be a disaster, or you could really align them and sort of push aggressively in one area. So I think the ability to set clear direction is also really important.
Awesome. So I'm going to start from the last one you mentioned. So interpersonal skills, being a great leader, being always curious, being humble, and lastly, but very importantly, be friendly with your CFO and understand what the language is and how your team is actually bringing value to the table beyond just growth. Nick, I'm going to ask you a question around moments, campaigns, or projects, or people that in your career you think have really had a major impact to perhaps fast track your path to head of growth. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So when I was at Amazon, I mentioned earlier I joined the Amazon Prime team, which is where I got into the consumer subscription space. Before then, I'd really just been focused on mainly email and CRM and a few other channels, but it was a very, very broad kind of like performance and brand marketing roles that I'd been in. I think joining the Prime team, actually marketing within the Prime team was more conversion rate optimization, experimentation. As a marketer, as marketers, the entire team knew and had taught themselves to code in basic HTML, CSS, and we were basically let loose on the Amazon website to drive a higher conversion. So I think there was really my introduction to the growth process or experimentation process for the first time. Plus, it was that aha moment of it's not just marketing that drives growth. There are other levers too.
Awesome. So yeah, your experience of trying different working in different marketing departments within one of the fastest growing company in the world definitely helped you learning the experimentation skills that you need to have to be ahead of growth. What about you, Meg?
Yeah, I would say it was when I started my business and I grew this community of 2,000 influencers and then like landed MasterCard. And I was like, shit, I just did this shit. And was like, wow, I really love doing this. I love it. So that was kind of like the passion part. And then I think it was like the learning, the test and learn, and the trial and error, which I think we've all said we felt like, oh, we shouldn't have been hired for these roles. But I think that is the role. It's a lot of test and learn, and it's okay if we get things wrong and realizing that. And then like at History Hit, I got to build a team of like 15. So like getting kind of like figuring out where the growth is coming from, testing lots of things, and then learning like creative was really, really important for us. And then just like honing in on that and then building a team around that was like amazing. And just kind of at the end being like, oh my God, I did this. Yeah, I guess that's kind of like how I got, yes, that's where the passion comes. I get it, emotion.
Yeah, it's essentially you realize where your true passion was, and you funded your business, and you just test and learn on your business and learned from what you could. Really, it's really great to hear. And also, yeah, not always not always you hear about people being so passionate about data and growth and test and learn, which is brilliant. Emily, did you have a aha moment or perhaps aha people in your career?
So many, but also just whoop whoop for the passion. I love the passion. Yeah, I guess like the initial startup founder who took a chance on me, his name is Dan Burkaw. I think we met and had a conversation that probably should have resulted in him saying, "You have zero experience, please move on." And instead, he saw something in me and he gave me a chance, and it completely changed my career. I don't know that I would have moved into tech at all if it hadn't been for that initial opportunity to, I guess, explore mobile with somebody who had been at, the company that really launched that as an ecosystem. So that was really cool. Then I would also say I was really fortunate that when I started consulting, there were a lot of people who really bet on me, gave me platforms, championed me. A large portion of the SEO industry was really generous, put me on stages to talk about app marketing, which was a, sort of relatively new concept at the time. So people like Cindy Crum, Rand Fishkin, Marcus Tandler, Will Critchlow, people just were really incredibly generous with their time, their stages. And then I also got to learn quite a lot through that process because I had my little specialism at the time and I was able to really grow my understanding of lots of different marketing levers from some of the best experts in the world. And then I would say Joanna Lord, who was my CMO at Skyscanner, she really helped me transition from a sort of growth strategist or consultant into somebody that could lead teams and really help me understand like what being a great leader meant to me. And then after that, Yanina Luca, who I went to work for at Depop, was the person who really gave me that first sort of head of growth title and remit. So big thanks to all those people. They've been incredible, and I probably wouldn't be where I am without them.
That's awesome to hear. Well, a list of very great aha people, I would say that you are. I think I've recognized Rand Fishkin among your SEO gurus that you were following. Maybe for some of the attendees might like to follow all the other Rand Fishkin and all the other SEO gurus you mentioned. So will be good maybe later if you can follow up in the chat their names so people can follow them on LinkedIn. That would be great.
I have to say, Rand will kill me if I say that he is an SEO guru.
Oh yes, of course, because he moved to
anymore. So like, don't follow him and say Emily said you were an SEO guru. He's
a zero-click content guru. That's I think his latest definition. But before doing that, Emily, I've got a question for you. If you had to start your path of head of growth now, what is there anything you would do differently?
I was telling Joseph before this call, this is like the hardest question for me to answer because that makes it sound like I had some really intentional path that I followed and can analyze and really understand what went well or didn't go well. And I honestly have no idea. I think like we talked about at the beginning, I just kind of followed the business impact that I was interested in, and it just led me to where I am today. But then I reflected a little bit more and I thought, okay, who have I like coached, mentored, guided recently who's ended up in this position, and like what sort of patterns have I noticed from people that are doing this today? And I think the main things that I've seen work really well are people who are able to quickly align themselves to business objectives. I think sometimes people think that to get into a growth role or a head of growth role, you need to apply for it. You need to go external. And I think actually probably this panel is a good example of cases where you kind of find your way into it. You might like squiggle in an existing company where you have one role and you might find yourself in another role as well. And I've seen people do this where they are in a company maybe doing a CRM role or an email marketing role or a paid media role. And I think what really breaks you out of that is if you can go to the source. And again, this is why I'm so big on commercial acumen. If you can find out what is making your business grow and what's making your business money, and you can sort of unpick that and understand what's working well and either diagnose opportunities that sort of augment that existing channel or suggest other growth levers that might be worth trying and adding to the mix. and then aligning yourself to the people internally who would be interested. And a lot of people are interested in making the business more money, but really find the people who have like a vested interest in it and offering your work and support to do that. I've seen that work extremely well for people who are looking for that kind of internal sponsor and like a way into a part of the business that's really focused on driving growth. Align yourself to business outcomes as quickly as possible. I'll probably pause there because I think the other panelists probably have better advice than I do.
That's awesome. Thank you, Emily. So just to recap, is essentially to align, your advice is to align yourself to business outcomes as early as you can by learning as much as you can about how your business grow, and offer to work support in other areas, and essentially share your learnings and insights. And again, test and iterate what works and what doesn't. Meg, what would you do if you had to start your path to head of growth now? What would you do differently? Sorry.
Yeah, same. I wouldn't do anything differently. I have no regrets. And because we're talking about squiggly careers, I'm just going to share, there's this podcast called Squiggly Careers that I'm going to share in the chat right now, because I highly recommend like anybody that wants to do squiggly career path, like to check that out. But yeah, I think actually the thing that I think would have been more helpful, which I've done more now over the last couple of years, is just networking, like connecting with lots of people who are in similar roles. So now I'm in a few different communities, like what's on WhatsApp, like, you know, and I think just reaching out to people. Actually, before I was in the communities, I actually like LinkedIn messaged like a CMO at a scale up and just said, hi, like, can I chat to you? I just want to know like how you got into this kind of role. Like, and I think what's weird is like people are actually very nice and they will just talk to you and kind of give you advice. And I think that's the most useful thing that I kind of wish I'd done earlier, just like start talking to people in the career that you want. Yeah.
Love that. So listen to you wish the Squiggly Career podcast came earlier in your career, and second, essentially more networking and speak to people of your similar career path, or perhaps career that you aspire to follow. Nick, what's your thought on that?
I think overall, when it comes to what I do differently, if I was starting again as head of growth now, like I've made lots of mistakes. I've learned from those. I think when I started as head of growth, growth wasn't an established area or function, and I was typically the only growth person within the business, so there wasn't really a structure behind it. I think what I've learned over the years is like, one, how to define a growth process, which is really important. Two, talk to customers as much as possible and as early as possible, especially when you join a new company, which in my first role, it took me like 3 years to work out that I should do that, and then it was invaluable. And then three is focus on the who and your team and develop those leadership skills, because I think also, yeah, when I became a head of growth for the first and second times, I was joining as an individual contributor. So then when I started to hire into my teams, it was like, how do I actually grow into a leadership position, and motivate, inspire, lead this team?
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. So if you had to start now, you would definitely start looking into putting together a growth process from the beginning, learn and actually talk to customers as well as soon as possible, and learn the leadership skills that you will need when you will have to become head of growth. Meagan, like how do you think, considering various factors that are that perhaps might affect the evolution of head of growth roles, how do you think the head of growth role will evolve in the next 2 years?
I feel like the foundation of the role is going to stay the same, which is that we need to always be adapting to consumer behavior and new technology. So I think that what's going to change is like the technology and the consumer behaviors, and then it's just us being able to adapt to those things. So like our reliance on data and AI, so using machine learning and like predictive analytics, I think is going to be really, really useful for us in these roles. So knowing how to look at the data and make sure that you're making the right decisions on those tools and analytics will be really become even more important. And then I think also like using data ethically is another one that we probably should be thinking about. Yeah, just responding to those changes that are happening, I think is what's going to happen.
Right. So foundation remains the same, but actually technology is the thing that's going to change, and roles will have to adapt to that. And as well, the usage of data and using data ethically, really like that. Nick, what's your thought on that?
By the way, firstly, I agree with the approach on like actually focusing on what's not going to change. And there, I think it, like in the macroeconomic environment and fundraising environment, it's about the focus on profitability and full funnel growth, and more companies focusing on product-led growth as well. I don't think that's going to change. I think too, the need to deeply understand your customers' pains, problems, highest motivation, dreams and desires will continue to drive everything else. And then also depending on your growth model, for me in the D2C space, I think growth is going to overlap a bit more with marketing, and the people that drive, or the companies that are able to drive higher growth are those that can translate those insights they learn from customers into compelling stories to change hearts and minds and drive that action and that direct response.
So profitability is not going anywhere. Product-led growth is not going anywhere, and the need of understanding customers is not going to go anywhere either. Emily, how do you think the role will change?
I feel like everyone's covered this so well. I don't want to add too much. I guess what I will say is, what I hope we evolve our thinking around. So I think one of the wonderful things about having this title or this scope of growth is like truly how nebulous it is, because it allows for sort of the flexibility or the adaptability to sort of chase what's working, which is amazing. I think I hope that adaptability does not go away. At the same time, I understand that I guess this concept of sort of like siloed domain areas, or this sort of like nebulous monster called growth that could both sort of overlap with and or like be marketing or product or commercial teams, is like a big challenge. And so I kind of hope that in the sort of crisis that seems to be happening, where everybody searches for some kind of internal identity of what's the future of product management, or what is the future of marketing, or what is the future of growth, that kind of doesn't distract businesses from ultimately what their goal is, no matter what they call this area or this team, which is trying to find sustainable growth levers that they can pull. And whether or not that's called growth in the future, I'm not sure. That's the part that I don't know if it will change, but I think this debate, I hope, goes away in the future.
Thanks, Emily. So regardless of what the head of growth or head of whatever that will become, again, going back to what's not going to change is the sustainability and profitability, and the I think all head of growth right now needs to start thinking about evolving the way that we think perhaps our roles or how our business actually will grow in the next few years. It's time now for a very quick fire round. I'm actually very conscious of the time. I've seen some few questions coming in. So I've got a couple of questions I want to ask. Please, no more than one sentence per answer. I will start from you, Nick. The course or book or podcast that you would recommend for anyone looking to become head of growth?
Yeah, I'm actually rereading it at the moment. It's a very old book from like 1966 called Breakthrough Advertising from Eugene Schwartz. But the principles in there are like foundational for direct response marketing and copywriting.
Great, thank you, Nick. And if you don't mind, panelists, if you can share all this in the chat, that would be great. Thank you. Emily, what's yours?
Okay, I have two. Can I pick two? So I think the Reforge community is great. There's a lot of amazing resources there, so definitely leverage that. My second one is, I think particularly for earlier stage companies, Matt Lerner's book, Growth Levers and How to Find Them, or something like that. Really great, very sort of easy to read, quick overview of, again, some of those, I guess, growth frameworks that Nick was mentioning earlier. He really breaks it down simply.
Awesome, thank you, Emily. How about you, Meg?
This is a bit out of the box, but I think this role is really about believing in yourself. And so there's an Instagram channel called a breathwork facilitator called Breath Pod, and he has this whole free series like on his reels, and you do these like breathwork sessions that are about believing in yourself. And honestly, like I felt so amazing afterwards.
I absolutely love that. Please share, because I'm definitely going to follow that. Meg, I'm going to stay with you. The most underrated growth channels or tactics?
I think because this role is kind of heavy on data and analytics, like I feel like maybe creative is underrated, but is becoming more of a thing. And definitely I've seen like through History Hit, we grew like doubled the growth from just like making our creative better and the creative process better and hiring the right people. That would like definitely would say that.
Awesome. Emily?
I feel like there's no universal answer to this, which is so hard. I guess what I will say is, I think with any channel, just being really intentional about how you're going to leverage it. I probably like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I would have answered this question by saying influencers, but like for us at Depop, that meant either influencers for brand awareness and using them for brand marketing, or it meant using them as affiliates. And I think like just being a little bit more clear on sort of what's the growth lever you want to try and to what purpose is really useful. But I mean, ultimately, the answer to this is so different for every company and every business model. I'd say sometimes just don't overthink it. Everyone's trying to find their like secret Facebook trick, and sometimes the stuff that you would think would work really well does work really well. Like no surprise that an abandoned cart journey works really great for Depop, because that's what works in e-commerce, and the trick is getting sort of the tech set up correctly. But it's really sometimes it's the simple stuff that can bring in a lot of growth.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Emily. What about you, Nick?
Already covered this, but I think in terms of foundations, talking to customers, it's like the one silver bullet in growth. So talking to customers and then bringing that insight to life, full funnel from like ad creative and the advertising side of things, all the way down to through that conversion path.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nick. So we have a few minutes for questions from the audience. So I'm going to pass you on to Joseph.
Cool. Thanks, guys. That was really useful, really insightful. Lots of questions have come through on the chat, and a few that we had in advance as well. To pull out a few things, a question from Matthew here, like where you have a situation where the kind of wider org doesn't really understand growth, do you have any tips around educating people on this mysterious science?
Who wants to answer that?
I can start. So I really think speaking to your leaders who are responsible for reporting on end business metrics are great places to start, because they tend to be the people that will have the most sort of broad insights about what the business performance looks like. And if you can work with those leaders to sort of break down how they understand the business's revenue and growth, that can give you often sort of mechanisms or insights or ideas that you can get really curious about in the rest of the organization to then sort of go back and challenge the growth model if you think that it should be broader and you have like a really solid financial reason to support that. I think where I would maybe caution is if you sort of go in and you're like, I want to do product-led growth because product-led growth is really popular and I would really like to try it. It's unlikely the business is going to like resonate with that. But if you can really build the business case for why you think that could be a really strong growth mechanic for the business, and you come into that conversation with, I think I could transform our ARR from X to Y by using this mechanism, and I'd like to explore that. And this is the sort of investment I would require. I just think that's a better way of sort of getting the business on board with exploring different possible mechanisms. The other way of doing it is to sort of look at the remit you've been tasked with. So let's say you work in performance marketing and your job is to drive some kind of revenue target for the business. You might then say, okay, I can drive this revenue target this way, but actually I had this other idea that could either increase that target by X, or I'd like to try reaching that same target by also doing Y. And see how that goes over. So those are probably the two different tactics I'd try.
Thank you, Emily. Does anyone else want to add anything to that?
One quick thing I'd add is if you read Principles by Ray Dalio, there's this concept of probabilistic decision making. I'm not going to go into it now. It's going to take too much time, but Google it, and it allows you to, like, to a greater extent than Vice or ICE, to build the concept of probability into prioritization and decision making. So if there's a bet you're thinking of taking that might have super high impact, but is quite high risk too, it allows you to put more intelligent numbers and decision making against that.
Nice. There's another question from the audience. If your current role is focused on performance marketing, how do you transition into a kind of broader growth role that includes product as well?
I can start again if no one else wants to.
Thanks.
I guess there's a sort of question mark within this that I think is basically like, how do you get permission to do that? And sort of how do you manage the crossover between them was what I was reading. I guess like I would really embrace the crossover and like lean deeply into the crossover. And I think probably if you are wanting to expand your scope and remit and there's opportunity to do that in your current role, that's a really great way to say, oh, this is sort of tangentially related to this product lever that I'd like to explore. So that's the path I'm going to go down. And that allows you to explore something in your current career path that then you can formalize as you develop sort of the business case around that concept. If there isn't an opportunity to do that in your current role and you have to do something sort of outside of that ecosystem, I would say one of the best ways to do that is kind of what some of the panelists have said, which is start your own thing. It's the easiest way to get permission to try different stuff. And it's potentially expensive and time consuming, but you'll learn a lot really, really fast.
Nice.
Thank you, Emily. Does anyone else want to add anything to that? We might have time for another question, Joseph.
Should we get a question from the audience? Is there anyone's got a burning question?
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
If I'm allowed to do so. I think a few of you have mentioned networking and connections throughout your career. Has any of you had experience with mentors, and if so, what was your experience with mentorship? How did you find it, and what are what were the benefits from it?
Yeah, I've done a lot of mentorship. I've also mentored a lot of women through this network called Bloom. And I think it's so, so useful. I also found a mentor who works at Yodo, and he's been so helpful like the last year, just with everything. And I forgot how I even met him. But I feel like just if you want to be mentored, you could literally approach someone and just say like, "Hi, can you help me, please?" Obviously not like that, but yeah, I think like yeah, approaching people in that way. I also, sorry, just going back to one of the questions, I also think like one of the things that's really important is like culture, and I don't think we talked about that, but like if you're interviewing with a startup scale up, like really understanding their culture will also be a huge factor in the way that your role is going to be defined, because of like the way that they think and that the way that they perceive things and how you should work changes so much to like your day to day and then what you will then do. So like actually asking that culture question on an interview, I think is just one of the things that also really helped me. Like I love days because of the culture. Like the people are just amazing, and they really help you get to where you want to go, but also like challenge you in the right way, not in like a mean way. Yeah, I'll share some like networking things on here, but I do think it is just useful to just be brave and just like message people through LinkedIn, because I think people are kind and will help.
Could not agree more with that. Thank you, Meg. I think it's time to wrap up. So first and foremost, thank you very much, Growth & Company and Joseph, to put together this brilliant panel. Thank you to the brilliant panelists as well for taking the time to panel the session, and thank you, audience, for joining and taking your lunch break to be with us. We'll share the recording with you if you ever want to watch it again. Thanks, and see you soon.
Yeah, thank you guys. So thanks guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.